So, the first Democratic presidential debate just happened, and as expected, they said some pretty stupid things about guns. So, taking it upon myself to debunk their ridiculous claims, and let's get started.
Senator Warren, we're going to get to the gun question here. Parkland, Florida, it's just north of here in Broward County. As you know, it has created a lot of teenage activism on the gun issue.
I'd like to chime in here and say that it did spark some teenage activism, but it was heavily stoked by gun control groups and magnified by the media.
It has inspired a lot of you to come out with more robust plans to deal with guns.
Robust isn't exactly the best word to describe it. I'd say it's more just restrictive. Robust implies that it has some upsides,
including assault weapons ban. But even if you're able to implement that, what do you do about the hundreds of millions of guns already out there? And does the federal government have to play a role in dealing with it?
So in this period of time that I've been running for president, I've had more than 100 town halls. I've taken more than 2,000 unfiltered questions. And the single hardest question I've gotten, I got one from a little boy and I got one from a little girl.
$10 says this didn't actually happen.
And that is to say, when you're president, how are you going to keep us safe? That's our responsibility as adults. 7 children will die today from gun violence, children and teenagers.
Actually, according to NBC, less than 4 children under 17 are killed with a gun daily, only 53% of which are homicides, and even less than that are actual murders, in a country with over 325 million residents.
And they won't just die in mass shootings. They'll die on sidewalks, they'll die in playgrounds, they'll die in people's backyards.
Why does it matter where they die? Does it make it more important if they die in a mass shooting, or less important?
Gun violence is a national health emergency in this country, and we need to treat it like that.
Is it really, though? In the U.S., assuming you don't commit suicide, in which case there are always other options, you have less than a 0.5% chance of getting killed with a gun.
So what can we do? We can do the things that are sensible. We can do the universal background checks.
Okay, so this could take a moment to explain, but just bear with me. So, every federally licensed gun dealer in the U.S., which is basically every gun store in the U.S., is legally required to run a background check on you when they're selling you a gun. The only ordinary instance in which you can get a gun without a background check legally is a private party transfer, which means you're buying it from a single person that isn't affiliated with any gun store or anything. But even then, they need to be sure that you're not legally barred from owning a gun. They can't sell you a gun if they know that you are a felon or are mentally unstable. This provision strongly deters law-abiding gun owners from selling to dangerous people. Now, it's not going to do anything to stop Mr. Shady from selling a gun to a thug, but neither is a universal background check law. You know why? Because they're already breaking the law in place. They're selling to people that they have reason to believe should not own a gun.
We can ban the weapons of war.
Weaponry that is useful exclusively in warfare is already practically banned in the U.S. You can't own rocket launchers or tank cannons or nukes without going through extensive paperwork. And when's the last time a criminal used a Tomahawk missile in the U.S.?
But we can also double down on the research and find out what really works, where it is that we can make the differences at the margins that will keep our children safe.
What's this? Like an actual good idea? That's not something I thought I'd hear. But I have a suggestion. So you know how the vast majority of gun violence in the U.S. is gang-related? And what do gangs primarily focus on? Drug trafficking. So, if we got rid of their business by legalizing what they're trying to traffic, then they wouldn't have any reason to be shooting anyone.
We need to treat this like the virus that's killing our children.
You didn't address, do you think the federal government needs to go and figure out a way to get the guns that are already out there?
What I think we need to do is we need to treat it like a serious research problem, which we have not done. You know, guns in the hands of a collector who's had them for decades, who's never fired them, who takes safety seriously, That's very different from guns that are sold and turned over quickly.
Wow, it's nice for you to recognize that the problem lies in the minority that abuses their rights instead of the majority of safe, responsible gun owners. But now, all you need to do is just avoid pushing for legislation that punishes and strips the rights of the majority in response to the actions of the minority. Then you'll get votes.
We can't treat this as an across-the-board problem. We have to treat it like a public health emergency. That means bring data to bear, and it means make real change in this country,
Thank you,
whether
Senator.
it's politically popular or not.
Senator Booker, you have a program.
We need to fight for our children.
Like I said, it's not an emergency, it's not a crisis.
Senator Booker, you have a federal government buyback program in your plan. How is that going to work?
Well, first of all, I want to say my colleague and I both have been hearing this on the campaign trail. But what's even worse is I hear gunshots in my neighborhood.
What neighborhood do you live in? I live in a high crime area in California, and I have been for about 6 years. I've only heard gunshots one time, and I'm not even sure those were gunshots. Looked on the news and I couldn't find anything about it.
I think I'm the only one, I hope I'm the only one on this panel here that had 7 people shot in their neighborhood just last week. Someone I knew, Shahad Smith, was killed with an assault rifle at the top of my block last year.
Well, assault rifles are already effectively banned in the US, so just goes to show how effective gun control is.
For millions of Americans, this is not a policy issue. This is an urgency. And for those who have not been directly affected, they're tired of living in a country where their kids go to school to learn about reading, writing, and arithmetic, and how to deal with an active shooter in their school.
Are you saying we shouldn't teach our kids how to defend themselves?
This is something that I'm tired of, and I'm tired of hearing people, all they have to offer is thoughts and prayers.
You can't say people are offering nothing because what they're offering is not what you want. Some politicians are pushing to get rid of gun-free zones because they prevent law-abiding citizens from being able to protect themselves when a threat arises.
In my faith, people say faith without works is dead. So we will find a way. But the reason we have a problem right now is we've let the corporate gun lobby frame this debate. It is time that we have bold actions and a bold agenda. I will get that done as President of the United States because this is not about policy, this is personal.
Thank you, Senator Booker.
Secretary Castro, I'd like to talk to you about something that Senator Booker just mentioned there, the idea of active shooter drills in schools. As school shootings seem like an almost every day or every week occurrence now, they don't make a complete news cycle anymore, no matter the death toll.
I can assure you, every mass shooting that takes place in a school gets significant media coverage. It just doesn't happen as often as people think it does.
As parents are so afraid as their kids go off to school that their kids will be caught up in something like this.
They have no reason to be as afraid as you say they are. Mass shootings in schools in the US are extremely rare.
Next to nothing has changed in federal law that might affect the prevalence of school shootings. Is this a problem that is going to continue to get worse over our lifetimes? Or is there something that you would do as president that you really think would turn it around?
Yeah, Rachel, I'm the dad of a 10-year-old girl, Karina, who's here tonight. And the worst thing is knowing that your child might be worried about what could happen at school, a place that's supposed to be safe.
Really? The worst thing is knowing your child is afraid of something? That's not a good sign.
The answer to your question is no, we don't have to accept that. And I believe that on January 20th, 2021, at 12:01 p.m., we're going to have a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate.
Somebody quote this.
The activists of Parkland, folks from Moms Demand, who have risen up across the United States and inspired so many people.
I think you're overestimating the size of the movement a tad bit.
You know, we may not have seen yet legislative action, but we're getting closer. The House took a vote.
Yes, a Democratic majority favored gun control. What a surprise.
In the Senate, the question often is, if the decision is between 60 votes, a filibuster, or passing common sense gun reform, I'm going to choose common sense gun reform.
I hope you're talking about actual common sense and not what Democrats say is common sense. What am I thinking? Of course, it's the latter.
So I believe that we're going to be able to get that done in 2021.
Secretary Castro, thank you.
Rachel, I have something to add to this briefly.
We'll give you 30 seconds for follow-up on that question, on that answer from Secretary Castro. Congressman Ryan.
You're talking about in the schools. These kids are traumatized. I support all the gun reforms here. We need to start dealing with the trauma that our kids have. We need trauma-based care in every school. We need social and emotional learning in every school. 90% of the shooters who do school shootings come from the school they're in, and 73% of them feel shamed, traumatized, or bullied. We need to make sure that these kids feel connected to the school. That means a mental health counselor in every single school in the United States. We need to start playing offense. If our kids are so traumatized that they're getting a gun and going into our schools, we're doing something wrong too, and we need reform around trauma-based care.
A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one.
Congressman O'Rourke, you're a Texan who's campaigned all over the state in 2018 in the most conservative parts there. What do you tell a gun owner who may agree with you on everything else? Okay, but says, you know what, the Democrats, if I vote for them in there, they're going to take my gun away. And even though I agree with you on all these other issues, how do you have that conversation?
Here's how we had that conversation in Texas. I shared with them what I learned from those students who survived the Santa Fe High School shooting. A young student named Bree, her friend Marcel, who survived another shooting, the mother of a victim who lost her life, Rhonda Hart. They talked about universal background checks where you close every loophole. We know that they save lives.
How do you know they save lives? I just talked about how they would be ineffective. And secondly, being able to sell a gun to a friend or a family member without having to go through the hassle of a background check is not a loophole. It was a compromise.
Talked about ending the sales of assault weapons into our communities. Those weapons of war were designed to kill people as effectively and as efficiently as possible. They should belong on the battlefield and not in our communities.
Okay, first of all, assault weapon is not a term that was given based on the function of a weapon. It was given based on the appearance of a weapon. Basically, things like pistol grips and barrel shrouds, those things are cosmetic features that don't affect the functionality of the firearm. Secondly, no. Weapons classified as assault weapons are not the same as the weapons that our Army uses. Our Army uses machine guns, while assault weapons have to be semi-automatic, meaning they fire one round per pull of the trigger as opposed to multiple. When you look at the facts, it's undeniable that the term assault weapon was created by politicians to incite fear.
Red flag laws, so that if someone poses a danger to themselves or to someone else, they're stopped before it's too late.
You mean the law that allows the government to strip a fundamental human right from someone without due process? Sounds like a good idea.
And what I found in each one of those 254 counties is that Democrats and independents and Republicans, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, agreed. But this effort must be led by the young people that you referenced at the beginning of this issue. Those students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas led the charge here in Florida, and they've been able to change those laws. They're making our democracy work, ensuring that our values and our interests and our priorities are reflected in the laws that we pass.
Like I said earlier, the activism was heavily stoked by gun control groups and was magnified by the media a lot.
Thank you, Congressman O'Rourke. Hang on. Let me give 30 seconds. Senator Klobuchar, the Iron Range. I'm curious. Gun confiscation, right? If the government is buying back, how do you not have that conversation?
Well, that's not confiscation. You would give them the offer to buy back their gun.
So you exclusively want the lawful people to give up their guns?
But I'll say this. I look at these proposals and I say, does this hurt my Uncle Dick in his deer stand, coming from a proud hunting and fishing state? These proposals don't do that.
Whether you acknowledge it or not, these proposals will hurt all law-abiding citizens.
When I was a prosecutor, I supported the assault weapon ban. When I was in the Senate, I saw those moms from Sandy Hook come and try to advocate for change, and we all failed. And then now these Parkland kids from Florida, they started literally a national shift. You know why? It's just like with gay marriage. When kids talk to their parents and their grandparents, they say, I don't understand why we can't put these sensible things in place. They listen. And if we get bested by a bunch of 17-year-olds, it's the best thing that ever happened. We need to get
thank you.
Are you serious? Did you just compare instating more gun control to legalizing gay marriage? The difference here is allowing gay marriage is sensible. but restricting a fundamental human right is not sensible.
I'm going to use 20 of my seconds just to say there's one thing we don't all agree with when it comes to guns, and I think it's common sense, and over 70% of Americans agree with me.
The polls that seem to suggest that Americans want more gun control likely have intentionally vague questions.
If you need a license to drive a car, you should need a license to buy and own a firearm.
The difference is, these days, the right to transportation does not require driving a car. However, the right to self-preservation basically requires you using a firearm.
And not everybody in this field agrees with that, but in states like Connecticut that did that, they saw 40% drops in gun violence and 15% drops in suicides.
Actually, according to crimeresearch.org, Connecticut's murder rate went down an insignificant amount when compared to the rest of the United States. That was the first part of the Democratic presidential debate on guns, and thank you so much for watching. I might make a second video on the second part, but I don't know, I don't think it's likely. I'll try though. So thank you for watching, and bye.